Hello and welcome everyone. Today we are going to start with a new thinker, Immanuel Kant, and on Kant also we are going to have 3 lectures. So, in the lecture today we will focus on his brief bio sketch or personal life, his intellectual context, and also his views on Enlightenment. So, Kant is a quintessential Enlightenment thinker who believed that the reason and rationality should guide our action. That means the use of reason and rationality will create a society which would be enlightened and progressive. So, Kant joined a group of thinkers who argued about how to achieve enlightenment, both at the individual level and also at the level of society or the community, and how to create peace, order in the society by using reason and rationality, which would be the basis of all kind of knowledge and also would shape the actions of individual. So, in this lecture today we are going to focus on his views on enlightenment. In the second lecture we also discuss how he connects this idea of reason, rationality to the question of freedom, morality and autonomy. And in the concluding lecture on Kant, we will focus on his views on kingdom of ends, dignity, perpetual peace, before looking at the critical assessment of Kant's political philosophy or political thought. So, that would be our division of lectures on Kant. Now, we will start with today's lecture, where Kant appears to be a kind of quintessential figure of enlightenment and a representative thinker of German idealism. And German idealism was a well developed school of thought within continental philosophy, which believes in the primacy of ideas and how ideas shapes human actions or determines all social collective actions in the society. So, Kant is a representative thinker of that school of thought which we call German idealism, which is different from materialism or the practical thinking that is there in England. So, he remains a quintessential enlightenment figure. So, when we talk about reason and rationality, immediately Kant comes to our mind, and it becomes a kind of synonymous with Kantian ethics, views on philosophy, epistemology and metaphysics. So, Kant remains a quintessential figure of enlightenment, and enlightenment is something which gives primacy to reason and rationality as a source of knowledge and also something that shapes or guides human action. And Kant is a kind of synonymous figure with that modes of thinking and also a representative thinker of German idealism. Kant had a tremendous influence on the 19th century continental philosophy. So, after Kant, it was necessary for every thinkers to read his philosophy and engage with his philosophy, whether they accept or challenges, that is different thing, but Kant had a kind of tremendous influence on the subsequent generation of philosopher throughout the continent. So, his major objective or primary concern was to understand what is called the limits and functioning of human knowledge. So, in enlightenment it was believed that knowledge is power, so to say, Francis Bacon. Now, what should be the source of knowledge, how it operates and what we can know and what remains which we cannot know. So, there would be things in itself which is very difficult for human being to understand. What we understand is guided by our sensation, our sense perception, our cognitive ideas and so on. So, Kant's primary objective in many of his writings is to understand the limits and the functioning of knowledge, what we can know, how we should know it, and what are the limits to our knowing. That remains the primary concern of many of his philosophical treatises. His philosophy influenced the works of Schopenhauer, Hegel, Herder and many others continental philosophers. And it is said that to be a philosopher one has to be Kantian, and Schopenhauer used to say that all men are child unless he read or understood Kant. So, Kant has that kind of determining influence on continental philosophy. He was a quintessential Enlightenment thinker who emphasized on the public use of reason. And what does he mean by this public use of reason? We will discuss in a minute when we will discuss Kantian views on Enlightenment. So, here it is necessary to understand that for Kant, a kind of quintessential Enlightenment thinker, reason and rationality is the basis of knowledge. However, what do we mean by knowledge, or in other words, what are the limits of the knowledge, that one also need to engage with or analyze, and that remains the major concern of Kant. In his philosophy, he combined the ideas like freedom, morality and autonomy. So, he combined all of these three together, and in doing so he is guided by a kind of Rousseau's approach to freedom and how one exercise freedom by engagement in the public life of the community by following the general will which is self-legislated. So, when we will discuss Kant ideas on categorical imperative, in the second lecture we will discuss more on how he combines freedom, morality and autonomy together. And for Kant, the most important thing for individual is to be guided by a sense of duty without any consideration for the consequence of one's duty. So, he developed a very distinct sense of duty for the individual which should be binding for them without any consideration for its consequences. So, through use of reason or what he calls categorical imperative, human being will have the knowledge of their duty, and once they understood it and had the courage of following it, they should not be guided by the consequences of their duty in performing what they think is their duty. More we will discuss on this idea when we will discuss categorical imperative. So, Kant combines freedom, morality and autonomy together and develop a very distinct sense of duty for the individual that is binding on them, and Kant in his personal life practiced this kind of philosophy as well. So, he emphasized that the individual's dignity and envisaged a society where everyone should be treated as an end in themselves and not for the means. So, in society many problems occurs because human beings treat each other, their friends, their fellow beings, their colleagues as a means for him or her to achieve certain ends, and that leads to a kind of instrumental use of human relationships or human association. In contrast to that, Kant argues that all individuals have dignity and every other members in the society must acknowledge and respect that dignity. By that he means that individuals should be treated as an end in themselves, not as a means for one to achieve certain other ends. Among the nation states also, he advocated a theory of perpetual peace and freedom without recourse to violence, and this we will discuss in the third lecture. He was also a strong advocate of republicanism and cosmopolitanism. However, there is a challenge in understanding or reading Kant, which is a very complex thinker, almost impenetrable even for the advanced learner, not to say about the beginners and the ordinary people. So, once you start reading Kant, you may find his ideas, the way he developed his arguments somewhat cloudy, in the sense of the range or the vastness of the subjects that he deals with. So, he remains somewhat impenetrable thinker, and in most of the universities, certainly at the undergrad level, you hardly find Kant being taught to the student. So, Kant remains a kind of impenetrable thinker even for the advanced learners, not to say about the beginners and the ordinary people. In this sense, he was truly a philosopher's philosopher, that is, for the advanced philosopher, Kant wrote his treatises. For our purpose in this course, we are going to focus on the secondary works on Kant and few of his newspaper articles and essays, and one of them is his newspaper article, What is Enlightenment, or what is Aufklärung, an answer to the question, what is Aufklärung. So, that article we are going to discuss today in the second part of the lecture, but many of our discussion on Kant would be guided by the secondary literature that is available, besides few of his own writings, essays and articles in the newspapers, and also one of his texts, Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals. So, we are going to deal with these texts on Kant, and through these texts we will try to understand Kant's views on enlightenment, categorical imperative, state, politics, individual freedom, autonomy and morality, and the theory of perpetual peace or kingdom of ends. So, these are some of the themes that we are going to discuss on Kant by looking at these texts.